Let's jump right in, okay? Like I said, I'm here with Erica Gutierrez, and I have some great questions for you. But first, I want us to hear a little bit about you. If you can tell us a little bit about you.
Great. Thanks, Ryan. So I am a registered dietitian for almost 20 years now. The last 10 has been really diving into functional nutrition, getting to that root cause for my patients. When I started realizing that people were eating less, exercising more, and it wasn't working for them anymore, I wanted to dig into the why. About that same time, my daughter was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition, and she started having really bad headaches, stomach aches, and gaining weight. And our providers couldn't tell us why. So it really led me down this path of uncovering so much more. And what I realized is that most conditions start from the gut, and that's why it's a place to start on the journey. I have two really big focuses right now. One is solving gut issues for patients. I work with them like 3 to 6 months and help them uncover what's going on. And I'm going to get more into GLPs later, but I just, sometimes when people get on these medications, they start to have side effects, stomach issues. And that's honestly a first sign of there's more going on in the gut, and that's something that they want to look at more deeply. So I'm excited to be here today. I can't wait to talk through all these things to help you improve your gut health and make it easier to lose weight.
Yeah, that's fantastic. It's funny that you bring that up because we talk about, and I've talked about this a little bit before, and we've talked about this before. There's so many different, there's so many more people having what really, autoimmune disorders. We have a lot of people with a lot more gut health, a lot more sensitivity to gluten, that kind of thing that wasn't there 50, 70 years ago.
Right.
And so, I said this, I think almost in every interview, the food companies are not doing really anything to help us with this. There's all these hidden things in there that are hidden by names I don't know how to pronounce. So, and it's important to know, I think we're going to get into this a little bit too, is what can help, what doesn't help. Some things are, super obvious, as I'm sure we'll get into, but some things are like, oh, I didn't know that. That's a surprise, and then what are options to counteract that. And really help the gut. So it's super, super important. I'm learning through you and through others that this is a really a great foundation, a great place to start. And one of the easier things, easy in the sense that the actions are easy, right? But it's hard. Sometimes it can be hard to give up some stuff because a lot of those things
Yes.
have a lot of salt, a lot of sugar, both things that make you addicted to that. A lot of salt on those McDonald's fries actually makes you hungrier.
Yes.
Getting, figuring all that out, finding that balance and that kind of thing. The good news, I think, for folks is that the gut can, I think we've talked about this too, the gut, it works quickly. Things go through your system pretty quick. So it can be fast work. Now, I'm not saying in 30 seconds, of course, but, it can, or even overnight, but it can work quickly. So, you make these changes and you start feeling the results pretty dang quick, which is always good to kind of, be like, oh, what I'm doing is working. You know what I mean? So, but let's start with the basics. Why are we even talking about the gut health when we're really focusing on weight loss, right? So what's the connection there?
Sure. And that's a great question to start off with because we really need to understand more of the fundamentals of functional weight loss. And I will say too that I'm someone that needs to understand the why before I'm willing to do something.
Yep.
So yeah, so here it goes. So kind of think of your gut as this bustling city. It's like a complex ecosystem. There's trillions of bacteria, which is kind of crazy, both good and bad. And this ecosystem plays just a massive role in almost every aspect of health, including weight. So first, the gut bacteria, they're directly involved in how we digest and absorb nutrients from food. So even if you're eating healthy, it doesn't mean you're breaking down and your body's getting that healthy diet. So it can affect how you metabolize foods. It even influences cravings. So for people that have strong cravings, I always look to the gut first to see what's going on. Secondly, this is where things can get a little complex. I don't know if you've heard of leaky gut.
Yep.
Yeah, it's more mainstream now. Essentially, it's increased intestinal permeability. So, this is where things can get through that gut lining that's not supposed to. So, really, only fully digested nutrients are supposed to get into the bloodstream. But what happens in the gut lining, it gets damaged or compromised from those, the standard American diet, that high stress levels, even certain medications can cause that barrier to be leaky. So then things can get through, toxins can get through, and then that's where it triggers that immune response. So this is where we often see food sensitivities start to come up. And we eat every day. We can't avoid it. So we're constantly eating things that inflame us. And it might be actually healthy foods if you have that intestinal permeability. So we're constantly having this low grade inflammation. And when you have that, the body does not want to lose weight. It's dealing with this inflammation, it's focused there and not on getting back to that healthy weight. So food sensitivities can be a thing to look at. Now, they tend to get a bad rap out there because there are a lot of bad test companies that don't really get to the root cause. So, but I will say the ones we use truly get to that. And as a byproduct of just switching to non-inflammatory foods, people start to lose weight. I do also want to share probably the most interesting thing, and I think we talked about this before, but the gut-brain connection. There are actual signals right in our intestinal lining that influence our appetite, our mood, our hormones, even how you burn energy. So we need to address this digestive problem. We need to heal the gut. And I know it can get really complex. So I've created kind of some broad categories, and maybe the listeners can kind of say, oh, this is me, or this is me, or this is me. So one is dysbiosis. This is where we have an imbalance of gut bacteria. So you have too many bad bacteria, not enough good. So the bad bacteria actually increase inflammation. It impairs absorption of nutrients. So like I said before, you're eating really healthy, but you're not actually getting that nutrition, and it can change metabolism. So that's one subset. Another one's the leaky gut. So this is that permeable gut lining. So we talked about this before. This is more of that immune sort of response, low-grade inflammation, weight gain from that. And then the third would be yeast overgrowth, candida. These are those nasty yeasts that cause us to crave food. It gives us fatigue, brain fog, and it also causes immune dysfunction. So those, I would say, are kind of like, there's a lot of nuances to that, but three basic types of gut issues that I see.
Yeah. Well, that's great. I want to kind of circle back to what you mentioned about the tests that you offer. And I think it's important because that really resonates with me, because I've done tests, at the doctors, but not necessarily this kind of thing, and it's tricky because I always, maybe not the greatest analogy, but I always kind of relate it back to, my old house. It was an old house built in like 1946 or something. So it needed work. And I'm like, I will pay a plumber whatever they ask, as long as I know they're going to do good work. And that's why I think it's so important. And I love that we're having this conversation, because you are fantastic. You know what you're doing. You're doing the right tests. Folks know. And I'm not saying that this is an exorbitant amount of money by any means. I'm not saying that at all. But I'm always saying that I want to be able to go to somebody who I'm going to trust, who I know I'm not gonna waste my money on. Even if it's $5, I don't want to waste, especially nowadays, I don't want to waste my money. So I'd rather, pay 10 for something that I know is going to be fantastic and going to actually get me results. So I like to circle back to that, because it really resonates with me. And I think, what you have to offer is so fantastic, and the stuff that you offer to folks is really priceless. So that sounds fantastic. And what can listeners do today? I wanted to ask, what can we do today? Because we're all like, okay, well, I'm watching all this stuff. Do it tomorrow. No. Let's start today. What can we do today to start improving the gut health? And what are some practical first steps just to get us in the door?
Yeah, that's really great, because I do want people to start right away. It can feel overwhelming because there is so much misinformation out there, and you hear from one person, oh, that worked, or this worked, what should I do? And I kind of break it down as to like what, how, and when you eat. So we have to feed that bacteria. Our gut changes every single day based on the foods we put in it. So I'm sure you've heard of some of this, like probiotic rich foods. So yogurt that has the live and active cultures, sauerkraut, kimchi, kefir, those kind of things are going to be really good to help proliferate that gut bacteria. Bone broth is another really good one. And you have to get a good brand, but it heals the gut lining. It has collagen, gelatin, amino acids, all the things that help rebuild that gut lining. So bone broth can be really simple. I will definitely encourage people to start increasing fiber. Now, when people say that, they go nuts. They like, will all of a sudden, just eat vegetables for 3 days and then have really bad stomach ache. So you have to go slow. I would say, just increase by a half a cup at a meal and slowly increase. Because some people with gut issues actually can't handle the fiber. It causes this bloating and gas and distension, and it's really uncomfortable. So if you're one of those people, you definitely need to look more into that specialty testing. But those fibers are important because that's the probiotic's favorite food. That's the gut bacteria's favorite food to eat. Super simple, hydrate. People forget to do that. There you go. Grab some water. Yep. It helps to heal the gut lining and it moves things along. So if you tend to be more constipated, check your water intake. You might not be drinking enough, and that can even cause dysfunction with the gut bacteria. And I will say mild dehydration can be signals of hunger as well. So outside of the gut, drinking water is really important. Now this next one, it's super simple, but it's not easy. Chew your food thoroughly. It seems, we all eat on the run. We eat really fast. And I blame, school lunches. We sat there and we had to eat in like 5 minutes so we could run outside for recess. So we taught ourselves that early on. But digestion starts in the mouth. It will really help break things down so that you can digest it. Another thing we've heard of is spacing meals out. So we used to think, for weight loss, you need 6 small meals a day. Actually, it really messes with the gut bacteria. We need time between meals and that time overnight for, it's called the migrating motor complex. It helps, it's like the cleanup crew. It comes through, it sweeps out debris. So when we're constantly snacking and eating, we never allow things to come through and clean up our gut. And then relaxing. If we sit back, take a couple deep breaths before we eat, we're setting ourselves up for digestive function, like proper digestive function. When we're stressed, when we're in that state, it's shut off. Like we're not digesting food at all. So it just literally sits there. So I think those are like simple, but not always easy suggestions.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The couple things that stuck out to me. The one of them is water, the water intake, hydration. I've heard some people recommend there are different electrolytes too to make sure it's not because it's not. And I think you'll agree with me. It's not just about drinking as much water as you can, or drinking a gallon a day. But it's okay. Well, I drank that. How much of it is it actually going to be able to get into my cells? So electrolytes can help with that. A little bit of Celtic salt, Himalayan salt. Stay away from table salt just because it doesn't really do anything. There's much more minerals and things in other types of salt, but adding a little bit of that just to get some electrolytes in so your cells actually take in the water, I think we've talked about is super helpful. And most people walk around, I remember I learned this years ago, most people walk around dehydrated. No, most people don't drink enough water. And it's one of the easiest things, especially in most parts of this country that you can do. And so for usually pretty close to free. So that's one thing that I'm like, okay, that I can do now. I even have like a little chart, even like MyFitnessPal or any of those apps, you can track your water. It can be a pain, but I promise it is worth it to do it because you can be like, I only had 8 ounces that day. Ooh, okay, well, I need to drink a lot more than that. And like you said, I always have I try to drink when I was doing keto, that's how I lost a lot of my weight. When I was doing keto, before I would have anything, I'd usually have a protein drink for breakfast. with some coffee, kind of help with the get caffeine, help with a little bit of the hunger. And then, but before I did any of that, I would have, and this is a lot, so you don't, maybe don't start with this, but unless you really want to, I would have 32 ounces of water before I had
Oh,
anything else. And that
wow.
would usually, I wouldn't start to really get hungry until around 9:30, 10-ish.
Mhm.
And then I'd have my protein drink. I was at an office, but so it was easy to I could have really anything at my desk. But a protein drink is easy on the go. I put ice in it. And, you can bring it with you, and it doesn't go bad. Just don't leave it in your car for days. Please don't do that. We've all made that mistake, but and so it really can make a huge difference in your hunger and also how you feel. You have more energy, and it's just water doing it. The other thing was chewing that you mentioned, and it's
Yeah.
funny because one other benefit is it takes longer for you to eat, so you eat slower, just naturally eat slower, which makes you feel fuller faster. So you eat less, instant weight loss of doing that. And like you said, there's multiple benefits. It's triple sided with different aspects. So those are definitely two things that are that really stuck out to me among everything else you said, of course. So we're on board with improving the gut health. We know that kind of the first steps to take. Is there any way to expedite the process? What are some strategies that we can do to speed up the healing of the gut?
Yes, so everybody wants the quick fix, but I will say healing the gut there is no magic bullet. We think about what, it's been however old you are, that many years of laying the foundation of your gut. So it will take some time, but usually we can find one or two or maybe even three things that really can shift things quickly. And I will go back to that specialty testing because then we have a custom roadmap specifically for you. But it will come down more to like supplementation at this point. L-glutamine is an amino acid, and it is really highly needed when we're healing the gut lining. It's found in food like protein-rich foods, so meat, poultry, fish, dairy products have it in, and then like legumes, nuts, seeds, whole grains. So it's in a lot of foods, but you really have a high demand for it when you need to fix the gut lining. So that some people will supplement with L-glutamine. Collagen is a really popular one and a pretty good one to help with the gut lining. And then we can get fancy. Quercetin, omega-3s, butyrate, slippery elm, like all of those are really good. But I would suggest before just jumping in and getting supplements, finding out what your gut needs, actually customizing it to you.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how
Yeah.
many people are like, here, this is a good supplement. This is a good one. And they end up having 20 supplements at home. And they're like, I don't know if that one helped. That's where, really customizing and figuring out for you that also like the breakdown of foods. So that's a big place for people. It starts with, chewing, like I said, but then some people don't have enough enzymes, or their acidity in their stomach is off, or their gallbladder and liver aren't working right. So in the stomach, they start to have those issues. So you might need support there. There's the big debate of probiotics, right? There's so many out there, and some that you probably have heard: the bifidobacteria, lactobacillus, and Akkermansia. Akkermansia is the big player with GLP-1s. If you're at all familiar with that, it's been shown in research to stimulate natural GLP-1 production. So tons of people are jumping on Akkermansia as a probiotic. What I will say though, you can increase Akkermansia better through polyphenols, and those are things like eating pomegranates and cranberries. So that's exactly what Akkermansia likes, and that's how we build it up. So probiotics are great, but not for everybody. And for some people, it actually, the ones that have the dysbiosis, the excess bacteria, you might feel worse going on a probiotic. So it is important to dig deeper into that. And that's where the specialty testing comes in. These tests, there are GI doctors that will do some stool testing, but they're looking at they'll look at enzymes, they'll look at H. pylori, they'll look at parasites, but they don't get to the root, in my opinion. They don't look at, how you're absorbing nutrients. That immune function, that's so key. We have an immune function in our gut and in the rest of our body. So I need to know, is that immune function off? All the types of bacteria, and then we look at overgrowth and parasites, and you'd be surprised, more people have parasites than you would think.
Yeah, one thing that I had learned too, in addition to that stuff, is I'm in San Diego, California. So it's great, but it's also a really great environment just in general for, I was talking to somebody else about this, about for mold in the air. It's kind of everywhere, and once that gets into your system, it's also really, really hard to get rid of that. So parasite kind of triggered that, to that in my head as well. So there's so many things that no one really talks about. So I'm glad you're mentioning those things, because it's things that, like I just said, people don't really talk about. So and that's fantastic. It's funny, our my partner and I, we have 3 dogs, and they eat raw food. Now, we don't make it necessarily ourselves. We found a company that is actually local here, not too far from us, in Lakeside. It's like Eastern San Diego, and it's most of it's her own recipe. She does great stuff, and but it is raw, so we give them actually some enzymes. Now, most dogs, it's funny because you talk about gut health when you train, and it's an interesting parallel when we're talking about changing foods for ourselves. If you change your dog from one kibble to another, they say to slowly transition it, overlap and then transition. With raw food, because it's what what we're used to eating, you can take them off of kibble in the morning, and that's their last meal of kibble, and put them on raw food in the evening, as long as it's balanced correctly, and they're fine. And again, some of that you can always kind of tell with the stools. It's, I have a 60-pound dog who looks like she lives like a rabbit has gone through the yard, if you know what I'm saying. So it's in how you can really tell, what goes in, what comes out, not to get too graphic, but we're all friends here. We can talk about it. But it's funny, and we had an enzyme powder that helps them digest stuff a little bit, because just because it does help. But it's interesting, because I'm like, I know so much about the gut health. Not that I know everything by any means, but I know a lot about gut health for my dogs, but not so much about myself. So I'm like, oh yeah, this is God. I'm seeing this parallel with my dogs, and then what we're talking about here. I'm like, oh yeah, we're all living creatures with guts and everything, so it makes sense. So that's kind of like where my brain is going. On the flip side to that, what are some things that people might be doing right now that are actually harming the gut health? I think I know of a few. I think I'm guilty of a few: soda, fast food, all this processed stuff. But what are some things that are actually harming, and then what are some things that we should cut out, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question too. So I'm always, about putting all the good stuff in, but sometimes there are those couple things that are just nagging at you, and it's like you're going a 10 on the treadmill, like incline, instead of 1. If you could just get rid of a couple of these, you can go all the way back down to 1, and it's so much easier. So I will start off with probably something but excess sugar. It feeds the bad bacteria. Not only does it mess with blood sugar and all this stuff, related to weight loss, but it feeds the bad bacteria and those yeasts, the ones that crave more sugar. So it becomes that really bad cycle. The processed foods, and they've done studies on this too, artificial sweeteners, additives, all those things that change your gut microbiome. So, and not for the better. So just by feeding or eating the good stuff, it feeds the good stuff. Alcohol is a big one. And this is like the ongoing use, the regular use of it. It leads to leaky gut. It changes the gut microbiome again. Antibiotic use, and I know I am not anti-antibiotics. They are life-saving. They're really important when needed. But, 1 round of antibiotics can wipe out your good and bad bacteria and change it for like a year. It can take a year to bring back all of that. So while it's important, like, you can also supplement with probiotics while you're taking antibiotics. And there's nuances to that too, but it's something to think about, because as a child, I was given antibiotics just like candy, right? So it's changed. We're more aware now, but there's a lot of people that have gone through a lot of antibiotics.
Yeah.
Another one people don't think about is stress and trauma. People often come to me after a really stressful period of time in their life, and it just that negative, constant, prolonged stress changes gut bacteria. It stops the digestive tract in its, steps. It increases inflammation, and we think we're all fine. Everybody deals with it, but it's not good for our gut. Another one would be eating late at night. Our digestion
Yeah.
slows throughout the day. And if we eat right before bed, it's like that food, it just sits there and, putrefies literally. The pH changes, it changes, everything. And then, we're not hungry for breakfast in the morning. We don't hydrate, we don't do all the right things. So it sets us up for failure, the next day already. So
Yeah.
those are some things that I would definitely suggest cutting out or limiting as much as possible.
Yeah, to your point, I'm also I'm also an actor. I do musical theater around San Diego, some regional theaters around San Diego, and one of the things that I learned is two things. First, forming some kind of habit that kind of gets your day started, and puts you
Mhm.
like on the right track can really change. And that's not really kind of adjacent to what we're talking to, but if it gets us on the right track, I would always make my bed every morning, especially kind of talking to the stress point during
Yep.
Tech Week. So that's when for those who don't know, Tech Week is usually the week, maybe 4 or 5 days leading up to the opening night of a show. And you are in rehearsals for, 5 to 8 hours a day, depending on the theater. And it's when all the elements for the first time are coming together. We have the lights, we have the sets, we have the costumes, we have the microphones, we have everything going on. And a lot of it is standing and waiting and standing in one place and waiting for the lights to be changed or whatever it is, but it's super stressful. It's the first time you have props in your hand, so it's the first time you're doing the show, and it's a really high stakes, super stressful. So during Tech Week, I'm like, I need to make my bed every single morning, and that just
Mhm.
set me up for a good thing. So if you're going to have high stressors this week, you have a lot of meetings this week, or you have interviews coming up, whatever it is, really make sure you look at those things and plan ahead, because it can make a huge difference. And two was the eating at night. Again, as a singer, the eating at night, if you eat late at night, you'll notice in the morning, our voices tend to be a little groggy in the morning anyway. But if you've eaten within about 3 hours of going to bed, what also is happening is that stomach acid is also, and can do not necessarily damage, but rough up your voice. So I found the mornings when I need to, and I need to hit a high note at 9 a.m. because I have an audition. If I ate late the night before, which again, theater, it's prone to, I get out of rehearsal at 10 or 11 at night. What's open? I'm not going to go home and cook. What's open?
Mhm.
So,
Yep.
and of course, on your way home, that's where they plant the fast food places. They're always in neighborhoods, usually. So you have to drive past 17 different fast food places to get home. And so, but anyway, going back to what you're saying, eating late at night, I knew that, by accident, kind of to what you're saying. I was not doing that by accident, just because it's not good for vocal health either. So it's funny how it
Interesting.
doesn't
Yeah.
just affect one thing. There are multiple reasons, all valid and all singularly great reasons to make a change. So that was something that just connected with me. So I had to mention that. But we have time for, I think, just one more question. So you mentioned earlier GLP-1 medications. We hear a lot about them, especially in contact with weight management. We have, Wegovy and Ozempic, which is semaglutide. We have Zepatide, I think it is, and the retatrutide, and Manjaro, all these different things. So is there a way that gut health ties into GLP-1 medications? How does it affect? You mentioned a little bit about it, but what are the ties, or the connections with GLP-1 and the gut?
Yeah. So this is like really exciting areas of research that are popping up, because 1 in 6 have been on a GLP or are currently on it in the US. So there are a significant number of people on these, and
Yeah.
we're trying to understand, because GLP is in the gut, but we're injecting it. So what is the changes in mechanism, and how do we boost GLP-1s naturally? So it's a gut hormone, and it plays a really key role in blood sugar, in slowing that gastric emptying and making you feel full longer. So that's, it helps you eat less, right? There's even influence when the GLPs are triggered to influence appetite in the brain and stopping, feeling satiated. So the gut bacteria, and it's the function of these, it's called L cells. They're in your intestinal lining, and they play a role in producing and regulating it. So as you can imagine, if you have a damaged gut, your L cells are damaged, they're not producing the GLP-1. And that's why these are working for so many people, because we're supposed to be able to do this on our own, but we have gut issues and we're not producing them. So these tiny sensors, these L cells, are when they hit, or food hits them, what happens is they produce the GLP-1. And it could be from a carbohydrate, a protein, or a fat. There are some foods that produce more than others, but I think it's still really coming back to healing the gut, because if the L cells are working, you'll have the GLP-1 production regardless, right? But what it does, I kind of had mentioned, it slows down digestion. So it lets, blood sugar won't shoot up. It'll just slow things down. We'll feel full longer. And then that signal to the vagus nerve and the hypothalamus. Those are two really important pieces of digestion. You've probably heard, when you're really stressed, some people will all of a sudden eliminate, they'll have diarrhea really bad because it's that gut-brain connection. But the other one's the hypothalamus, and that one's responsible for hunger cues and energy balance. And if it's not getting the signals, it's thrown off. It doesn't realize the body's had food. So it just keeps producing those hunger signals. Another big one is the insulin piece of it. So this is the glucose, blood sugar metabolism, and it plays an important role at food. So it just keeps producing those hunger signals. It signals that pancreas to release insulin and help lower blood sugar and get that glucose into the blood. So kind of like I said, people with these gut issues tend to have really poor L cells. So then we're not releasing the signal. We don't feel full. Our blood sugars are out of whack. We're not digesting our foods properly. So food-wise, there are a couple things you can do to enhance, kind of a hack, right? Eating your vegetables first. I know it's not super fun, but it does a lot of really good things. It enhances that release of GLP-1. It slows down digestion. It makes you feel full, kind of like you had mentioned earlier about when you slow down eating, you eat less because you're signaled, right, that your body's actually getting food in it. Another big one is those high fiber foods. So this can be oats, quinoa, beans. Those help boost the GLPs. And then I also think about the proteins and healthy fats. So fish, eggs, poultry, there are plant-based proteins too that'll stimulate it. The nuts and seeds, avocado, olive oil, all the things we know, but in research, they've actually shown that those boost and enhance the GLP-1. So by eating a healthy diet, healing that gut lining, you will naturally start producing more of your own GLP-1. And it's a lot cheaper to produce it on your own than to be taking that medication.
Yeah, for sure. One thing that I kind of have noticed, because I've been talking to a nutritionist recently, is one thing that I love, and this is, I feel like some people are really don't like it, and some people really do like it, is jicama. I just love jicama, and they were like, well, maybe instead of do hummus, maybe instead of and I'm not a huge hummus person, but it's fun. And if you want to eat more jicama, that's a great place for fiber, also a great place for potassium. It is high carb, but it is also really high fiber. So, something maybe if you don't want to just eat it, like it is, maybe that with hummus, that also has some protein in it as well. So you'll get that protein diet in your diet. So and things like that. And again, like you mentioned, super high fiber. And then another one that I kind of wanted to, and this is kind of off the cuff, but I wanted to ask you if you know anything about a new sugar alcohol. Or I don't know if I actually don't know if it's a sugar alcohol. It is a allulose. It's no calorie, no carb sweetener, all natural. I've heard really good things about it, but I was quickly trying to look up. I'm like, what does it say about gut? What is it anything about the gut? And some people have reactions to it, some people don't. I've tried it before. It can have, like you mentioned, it can have GLP-1 effect on the body. It can actually help you feel fuller. And so I have noticed that. So I'm wondering if you know anything about allulose, and if not, I suggest people look into it themselves. But have you tried it? Have you heard of it? What do you know about it, if anything?
Yeah, good question. And I think the industry is going to be changing so fast because of the popularity of GLPs. And, everybody's jumping on like, now this will be good with GLPs and this and that.
Yeah,
What I will say, you're right. Some people do well with it and some don't. And it depends on the types of gut bacteria you have and
I see.
here's what I'll say. Like if you have a ton of it, you're going to start to change your microbiome in a certain way. That's why eating a really varied diet is the best way you can go, because you're keeping that diversity of the gut. And when you have those super sweet flavors, it will spike your blood sugar, even though you're not increasing, actual carbohydrates, and it changes the palate in your mouth to want more sweet.
I
So
see.
I'm saying like it's way better to use something like that than, high fructose corn syrup, for example.
Right.
But everything like that in moderation and balancing your meal properly. So yes, I think it's great. I don't think we have enough research yet to know how it fully
Right. So I know
impacts
it's pretty
that.
new. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think it's definitely something to consider in the mix.
It's also not particularly cheap. I think one little, like, 1 pound bag of it at Sprouts is the only place I can find it is Sprouts. I think it's like $10 for one bag. So
Yeah.
it's not cheap either.
Yes.
And I think it's 1 1/3 cup to 1 cup of sugar ratio. So you have to use more, and it's more expensive. So use it as you will. But there are also some that I've noticed, speaking about, probiotics and stuff like that, is I think it is Oikos Triple Zero. Yogurt uses that instead of sucralose, where I think sucralose is just Splenda.
Mhm.
So if you can, I think if you're gonna have yogurt and stuff like that, I find yogurt to be a little too tart for me. But if I need a little sweetener, I add a little bit to that. I add a little bit of that to it to make it a little sweeter instead of sugar or that kind of thing. But if
Nice.
a lot of sugars in a lot of stuff, especially in America. So there's a lot of sugars in a lot of things that you're not expecting it to be in. So even stuff like yogurt and stuff. So plain yogurt's of course the best. You can always add your own things to it, add fresh fruit and stuff like that. Plus you're getting the fiber and all of that. Anything that includes the puree. Kind of going off topic right now, but I know. But I've learned things that anything that includes especially with the flavored yogurts and stuff, because that's one I'm just kind of getting into. I never really liked yogurt before, and now I'm kind of getting into it.
Nice.
Is anything that has the actual fruit puree in it, because then you keep the fiber, the natural fibers, and all that kind of stuff. So that's excellent. There's a couple that have, like I said, allulose instead of sucralose, and if you have to pick between the two, I think allulose is the safe, the better thing to pick, between. So definitely some great information. I thank you for everything you've shared with us. I think and thank you everyone for joining us today. I think we all got some powerful takeaways. I know I did. I learned a whole lot. Thank you, Eric. I appreciate it. Don't forget to grab the VIP upgrade if you haven't yet. It's the best way to keep access to all these interviews and a lot more. So thank you again, and I will see you all at the next session.
All right. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.